I got a
Okay.
bit.
All right. Do what you need to do, man.
Yeah, got it. Thanks. Okay. All right. I'm ready. I got my coffee. I'm only 12 hours late.
Yeah, only the downside of the downside of fucking
Well, my-
time differences, like
What time would it have been for you?
midnight.
Midnight. Oh my God. Okay. I'm like talking to Harper. I'm like, there's no way he meant 10 a.m. because that would be midnight for him.
No, I designed it that way because I'm just like, okay, I'd rather have it for you in the morning so you're not like late, because it's a Saturday evening. Like I figured you'd want it to yourself. That's why, like, okay, and that's what I've been doing for East Coast. I've just been doing it Saturday mornings, like East Coast time.
Well, I'm on West Coast now, though. So
Yeah, so like, well, like that's a reason why I wanted to try to accommodate it for you, like just so you can kind of get out of the way in the morning.
I don't even know how I did that. But I'm gonna have to, Joe. I'm gonna have to diffuse myself real quick. Hang on.
God,
Give me 1 second.
God damn it. All right,
Why
all
don't
right.
you give us a little intro while I
All right.
diffuse this window,
All right.
just so the
Joey
audience knows
and
how.
what's his face?
Oh, is there language here? Or are we being good?
And this is a conversation. I've been going off. Like I don't really have much of a filter. So
How many cups of coffee in are you?
this is half a cup right now. Again, I'm still waking up, sort of deal. I just woke up maybe like half an hour ago. So I'm just like still dozed, hungover, like again, heartbroken, feeling, I don't know, not promiscuous, but kind of gay. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, just like a little bi-curious, a little
Naturally.
Pandemonium.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what can you do during a pandemic?
I don't know. Take up knitting.
Yeah, there you go.
It's hot in here because I got all the windows. I got like stuff closed for you for your
Yeah.
audio. So I'm gonna sit here and sweat. But let's get into it. What's our top? Also, is there a title for this podcast?
Yeah, like so I didn't really have much of a title or anything. I'm still trying to build that consistency, but like, yeah, it's essentially just like, yeah, you and I were talking Joey, and then we're talking Wes Anderson movies. So yeah, I think I'm just trying to remember. So I'm gonna get the ball rolling. What was your first Wes Anderson movie like that you've seen, like, or when did you start looking into him?
Yeah. Question 2. Is this like all raw or do you cut it up?
So right now I'm just keeping it raw, but like probably down the line when I have more time, I'll probably try to splice up little clips. But yeah, right now it's pretty much all raw that I upload. But like I try to keep the talks to about an hour.
Okay. First Wes Anderson movie I saw, I wanna say Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou.
Okay, so 05. Do you know when you saw it?
First time it wasn't in theaters or anything, but I want to say somewhere in between the time it came out to like 2010, right? So somewhere in between there.
Yeah.
Oh God, I'm like so much ADD just got on here. It's like, all right, I'm gonna pull up like just Wes Anderson on IMDb. Just
no worries. If you ever need a share screen, I can whatchamacall, I can just send it your way, or like make you a host, whatever it is. You have something.
This should be okay. Let me say this though. I would say my introduction to Wes Anderson might not be the most like pivotal part of my like relationship with his work, but yeah, it's, Life Aquatic was like the first introduction. I think that like biggest standouts for me, besides like the style and form and the specific way that he directs his actors to appear as though they were born from his universe, which he does, and I think that's like such a cool thing to see. I think Tarantino does a little bit of that as well, and you can see like the more extremes of if you watch like Tim and Eric Awesome Show, or like check it out with Dr. Steve Brule. Those guys are able to like coach these actors, and honestly, like people like Will Ferrell, or like well-known actors, John C. Reilly, obviously, they're able to coach them to all act in this like very similar manner, and even kind of like people that you haven't heard of, like Scott Stewart, who plays Scott Clam on Check It Out with Dr. Steve Brule
I
on
haven't
Adult
seen it.
Swim. Have you ever seen that show?
I've heard of it, but I've
Check it
not
out.
seen it.
Yeah. They're just able to get all these people to like, act in this very specific way that is,
well, is it like very presentational, like how Wes Anderson is, like with his dialogue, just like it's very presentational, but like also just like very like I don't know how to quite describe the speech of it. Just like it feels very like, well, because every time I think back to like his dialogue, I always think of like the Ray Fiennes character. It's just very like, very like direct and like, but very like, just like proper, like well thought out, like, or just like, I don't want to say meticulous. I can't find the right rhythm for like how I want to explain it. But it's campy.
Well, that's exactly what I mean. I think you said it right there. It's a rhythm, it's a cadence, it's a very specific, there's the way that he puts or at least like directs his actors to the placement of the beats, the way they emphasize, the way they deliver. We can all agree that it's a very similar, across the board. It's and that is evident, evident in Isle of Dogs. It's evident in Bottle Rocket and the short, like just across the board. Whereas his like visuals might not have been quite there, although you can see, the arc, but it might not have been there in Bottle Rocket. You can definitely see the directing style and the acting style is unique and similar. Unique because it is Wes Anderson, but kind of strict to that Wes Anderson feel across the board, right? It's been there from the get-go. So
yeah, I
from
think
94.
Yeah, I think just his films have just slowly started to become more Wes Anderson as he's just started making more movies. I think his most like Wes Anderson film has probably been like the Grand Budapest Hotel and Isle of Dogs. Like, it feels very much like, okay, this is distinctly Wes Anderson, but I feel like his style really started to come to form like maybe during like the Royal Tenenbaums. I feel like it's his first like glimpse where he got like a real sizable budget following Rushmore. And then I would say his real symmetry and long shots, I think, became more pronounced following Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Okay. It's definitely been a minute since I watched more of his earlier work. I remember, certain things, especially that ending to Life Aquatic, which was after Tenenbaums, but before, Darjeeling and Fantastic and all those things. Remember that scene at the end of Life Aquatic when they're all like making their way, I think, down the boardwalk, and Queen Bitch by David Bowie's playing, and it's just you can feel that, and especially with like the boat, it's cool that he was able to keep that style of that very like I feel like it's a symmetrical for sure, but it's like a boxy kind of style, right? Like all of his films almost could just take place in a box, and the camera only swish pans on like 90-degree pivots. That's kind of like how
I think that's kind of the fun of his films is production design. Like it's just it's very much like, well, it's economical, but feels like very theatrical. Like seems like very kind of like small scale, but deliberate and then kind of campy. I feel like it's very specific in Steve Zissou with the design of the ship, where just like you kind of go in all these sections.
I was trying to remember if that was that movie when the camera's moving throughout the ship and you're able to travel from room to room, and it's obviously a set that it's almost like a Hollywood Squares type of like built on top of each other set. It's wonderful. There's this element of like kind of like fantasy and like childlike charm and like that, because kids, they play with dolls, and it's like we're watching Wes Anderson and we feel like we're playing with like this dollhouse that he's created. It's
Yeah,
very
that is the perfect way to describe it. And even then, like the stop motion little, like, what is it? Was it a whale or a shark that kind of floated around?
Yeah,
So
there's
like
the big
that added, I feel like that added more into the kind of the dollhouse kind of effect.
yeah. Yeah, and I love that the choice to do these very like specific and obvious stop motion animation. I think it was claymation for that one specifically, with the animals, and especially the shark and the seahorse and everything. It's just like so fantastical and reminiscent of like the old Beatles movies, like Yellow Submarine and that kind of stuff, and Fantastic Planet, and like all of these things, harkening back to like an age that wasn't concerned so much with realism in film, and that's what Wes Anderson is. He's not concerned with painting a picture of a film that's like, a few characters having a dramatic event. He's creating this very niche universe that stands out like a sore thumb, and demands our attention, in a way.
Yeah.
And
Well, I also feel like his films feel like little illustration books. Like, I just open it up and I just think of like, the establishing shots in Grand Budapest, like just like the trolley's just going up. I just feel like it's very much just like a children's book. I just open it up and I just see the pictures of like, that little trolley just going up there. I'm like, this feels like, that's what I love about his films. Like he really kind of dives into that to make sure that like, okay, like it has that authenticity for the world, that it's believable that you can live in it, but you can still kind of like have that. Again, I'm going to sound pretentious saying this, that like that aesthetic distance, like that you can still like appreciate the art for. I don't know. Like I'm trying to like still figure out the right wording to how to explain his style in that manner, because it goes beyond just his technical abilities, like with color palettes and production design. Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, we keep adding to this. We keep supporting this idea that his films, although raunchy at times and wildly inappropriate for certain ages and audiences, depending on your moral backbone, they are very childlike. They are, and especially things like Fantastic Mr. Fox and Moonrise Kingdom, but like across the board. I mean, you just described it. I described it as a dollhouse. You describe it as like a picture book. These are like almost movies from the perspective of children, like a child's vision of the world. I mean, Wes Anderson's vision of the world, or at least the one he portrays, is innocent and beautiful to an extent. And all, like these characters are dealing with real things and very dramatic things and very human things. And, that obviously the, just emotional or otherwise. And I think the biggest like standout scene for emotional impact is that scene in Royal Tenenbaums, right, where Luke Wilson's character is looking in the mirror and Elliot Smith is playing, and he's I'm gonna kill him tomorrow, and it's so real and like such a just jarring scene, and he's still doing these things, where certain cuts that he's able to do, where I think there's that moment of like someone comes in and they see Luke Wilson's character with with the blood running down, and if I remember correctly, it cuts from that to like the siren, like on the car, and like him being brought into the hospital, and it's like, although it's this dark scene, it's still very, very childlike in its presentation.
And that's sorry, keep going.
I just think that that kind of like encapsulates Wes Anderson's charm, it kind of like explains why we feel like it's so fantastical, is because it harkens back to like our own youth,
Yeah, and that's a great way to think about it, because his films are quite tragic, or at least like the characters in it are like pretty tragic. Like I think back to like Moonrise Kingdom with Zero. It was Zero, right? Or Mustafa.
In Moonrise.
No, not Moonrise. Sorry, not Moonrise. Grand Budapest. I'm gonna start working my way back, but
Zero Mustafa.
Yeah. Okay. So he had a pretty tragic ending, and even in the beginning, where he like you find out he was like a refugee, like pretty tragic sort of character. Going back to Moonrise Kingdom, the lead character, I'm blanking on his name, the kid. like, you know, basically being an orphan, and then like nobody wants him, as even his adoptive parents like kind of gave him up. Then kind of going back to Fantastic Mr. Fox carries over that like this fox has like an existential crisis, he's trying to like, you know, uplift, like, you know, provide better for his family. Then Darjeeling Limited feels like a bit of a coming of age, just like these brothers trying to come together with like, you know, family, kind of similar in Royal Tenenbaums.
Sure, but dealing with loss, right? And like in Darjeeling, these characters are coming together over the loss of their father, right? And they're going to find their mother in India, who's kind of just been doing her own thing, and is disconnected from them and their world. I mean, and what's, you know, like, yeah, I don't know.
Well, like that's also been an ongoing theme in a lot of his work, is just like family dynamics, like either like father-son related, or like what you just mentioned, just like some sort of connection with family, whether it's like actual family or like kind of creating like, you know, like a pseudo nuclear family. Is kind of what it's kind of going.
Question for you: Why do you read Zero Mustafa as a tragic character?
Well, I mean, he ultimately lost everything in the end in Grand Budapest. I mean, he did have a brief moment of greatness in his life, like happiness, but at the end he like lost the love of his life shortly after they got married. Like he lost his mentor who was shot in defending him, and then like he ultimately lost the hotel in the end. But the gleaming part, the brightening part of that ending is that his story lived on, which is why at the ending you see the little girl reading the novel, like so just like it did have that like redeeming quality, that like, you know, as tragic as this time, because it was supposed to be like a Second World War like equivalent to it, just kind of like all these refugees just scattered, and then like you know, and then it was kind of like these war times during refugees, and then they're being captured. So it's just the fact that like, yes, he owns this grand hotel and he's wealthy, but like, you know, he would give it all up if he could just like, you know, have the people that he lost. And again, it's kind of like going back to the same sort of grief that he had, like that was shown in some of his other films. But I think it was just like that as how I kind of viewed his kind of tragedy of a character, because he still remained humble, like following, like he never like did any like the stereotypical rich guy things. He was just like, I just happened to inherit this, and it was just on like a spit handshake agreement that I had with forgetting the Ray Fiennes character, but like it was basically just a handshake and agreement that they did in that trolley cart. He's just like, I don't have much, but I will make you my sole heir. And it was just like, okay. And yeah, that was the ending. So that's how I view his, as kind of being a tragic character. So
yeah, I never personally have read him in that way. You know, I think he's experienced tragic things, but I don't think that makes him necessarily unique or defines him. I think Zero Mustafa is an optimistic character. I think he's one that we're seeing at, you know, two pivotal points of his life, one, you know, in his youth and kind of towards the sunset of his life and career. But I think he's happy, you know, I feel like he's contented himself to living out his remaining days in the place where he holds the fondest memories, you know. And
well, like, yeah, like it's nostalgic for him.
Yeah,
like,
but I don't think, you know, I think there's people, I mean, people in life that will spend their whole life searching for purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can see that the narrative Wes Anderson's given us, although within the frame of this book and within the frame, you know, we go from the book down to, Mustafa telling the story to the writer, right? And then was it Jude Law?
Yeah, Jude Law. Well, like it's a couple of characters, but yeah, Jude Law I think was the main one.
Yeah, and then like of course we have his story that we're actually watching, but within that story, and which is explaining Zero's youth, you know, we get these two points of his life, and I think we get the explanation of like what made his life complete, and it was very young for him. You know, it was like the most important days for him were as a kid, and yeah, I feel like Zero Mustafa is like not tragic, but just kind of like melancholy, maybe.
I think that's a better word, but like at least an optimistic character with either like a tragic backstory or has experienced extremely tragic events. So
yeah. I mean, he's 100% experienced a lot of tragedy, but it's interesting to see him later in life explaining these things, because that's how life works, and I'm sure if you talk to any old person at a home, where they're assisted living or what have you, I mean, like, I'm sure they'd be able to tell you tragic events, but they never seem to really tell it in a way that is tragic or self-pitying. It's always with this golden glow of nostalgia, as you said, that just kind of covers over all that tragedy and that hurt and that pain with this like soft, um you know yeah,
Yeah.
soft glow. So yeah, but interesting.
So I want to keep going with this. So like carrying off that, like we were talking about Wes Anderson's dialogue. I think one of my favorite like bits of dialogue is early on in Grand Budapest, where they introduce Zero, and he meets the Ray Fiennes character, and the Ray Fiennes character is kind of given like a brief job interview, and you just hear I always forget the kid's name, like who's playing Zero, but he's like explaining like his background. He's like, I experienced at this hotel, and then like he's describing his education. He's like, I studied both reading and spelling for like 2 years. I'm like, what? Just like, and it's just kind of going in this like lateral shot, like classic Wes Anderson, probably left right sort of deal. But like, but I don't know, just kind of going into that world that like fuck, it feels like very Wes Anderson. But then what I also want to carry out, we haven't really talked about it much, is this comedy, because I think like it's probably one of the most iconic shots in the movie, but probably one of the funniest is where you just have Ray Fiennes' character kind of getting caught by Ed Norton, and he just starts running away like to the back, like was it to the back of the staircase, like single shot, same frame, just fuck, dude, just I think, but it seemed like very Chaplin-esque or like Buster Keaton.
Yeah,
very
absolutely. Yeah, it's not, and I don't know if you've ever heard of Every Frame a Painting on YouTube. It's
Tony Zhao, and I feel bad. Taylor Ramos, I think it was two people, Tony Zhao and I think Taylor or something. I'll come to me, but yes, I know of it.
Yeah, and there was the one episode that they did that was visual comedy, and they used Jackie Chan, as like the vessel for kind of explaining how you can make fighting and action sequences that normally we all just kind of jump to this like, oh yeah, action sequences, they got to be serious, it's got to be tough, but like Jackie Chan used that medium, as Every Frame a Painting wonderfully delves into it, that he used it for comedy, and I watched that when we were shooting Neon Fangs, and we wanted to have this scene everyone wanted to do as Every Frame a Painting kind of like compares to Marvel, right, where they'll do these action sequences and it's like a sword meeting somebody's like fist, and that's like 5 shots of just this, and it's, you kind of like, it almost, not to make a pun, but like in adding shots, adding cuts, you're like pulling those punches, and we're not seeing them, they're not as impactful. So Wes Anderson, he just, Gustav takes off in the back of the frame. He's small in comparison to these people in the foreground. That's playing into a lot of things right there with this character who's very boastful, very proud, but also is kind of like not a coward, but like not actually like a force to be reckoned with. He's just this dude that runs this hotel.
Well, it's also it's also the manner where how he runs too. It's just like, it's not like a full-on sprint. It's kind of like a quick, like a slightly faster jog.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, you bring up, some of the silent greats, and they didn't have dialogue to sell their comedy. They had their bodies and they had the space, and oftentimes a big part of it was that the cameras simply, you could not move them once you started rolling. They were so large and cumbersome. But yeah, that gave people like Keaton and people like Chaplin a challenge, and they were able to overcome it with a lot of this physical kind of vaudeville comedy, and Wes Anderson, of course, like has carried that on in his films and uses that physical comedy and that vaudeville and silent era, and it works.
Mhm.
it works, right? Like it might seem goofy and like silly and stand out, but that's exactly what he wants.
Mhm.
Which, I don't know what you'd want to segue into, but from there you can go into, and this is what I love to talk about when we get into Wes Anderson, is in Hollywood, there's classic Hollywood style, which is pushing that invisible edit, right? Um, it's this thought that you want the audience to really lose themselves, because the big group think of Hollywood is that what are movies? They're entertainment. It's an escape, right? It's a form of escapism. We go to the
Mhm.
movies to get away from our life. Well, Wes Anderson doesn't exist, to show you like just an entertaining movie. Of course, he wants to entertain you, but that's not his only goal. He wants you to be hyper vigilant of what he's showing you. He doesn't want you to to get lazy, and he also wants you to do some of the work. And what they'll teach you in film school is, the more cuts you add, the more shots you add, the less the audience has, the less you put on the audience to work out themselves. And then you watch, something like Citizen Kane, Orson Welles, where they have that, that shot that's always brought up,
Yeah,
where
the deep
he's,
focus shot. Yeah.
yeah, he's in the background through the window, playing with the sled. You have his mother, Agnes Moorehead, in the foreground, kind of talking over the terms of him being like, sent over to foster care. And you have those three levels of action, and it plays out. I think it's like a minute and 20-second shot or something.
Mhm.
That's a number I just pulled out of my ass. But it's this, the shot that lasts and plays out the entire scene, and it never gets stagnant. I
Mhm.
mean, at least for us, we're able to watch like black and white movies and not get bored. But like
Mhm.
it never loses us, because there's so much to look at. And of course, I could go into a deep dive on like just the framing alone and the shot comp and like why it works. Wes Anderson loves that. And the scene that I bring up the most, and to circle back to what I was getting into with classic Hollywood cinema, is he doesn't want the invisible edit. He wants you to see his edits. So there's a scene early on in the Grand Budapest Hotel where Mustafa's character takes Jude Law's character, which his name is
Is it just the author?
young writer. Yeah.
Young
So
writer. Okay.
Mustafa takes Jude Law down to the bathhouse room, which is like, it's great because it's one of these rooms that I think they're talking about, like it like hasn't really been touched, but that could also be something I made up. But anyway, more importantly is the shot reverse shot, which
Mhm.
is, something that's used to show two characters having a conversation, and oftentimes relied on for those invisible edits, right? Because once we have established our shot, we go to our next shot and we return to that shot. We have established our shot reverse shot, and we can go back and forth as need be. The audience has been trained enough, unconsciously or not, watching all the movies since they were a kid, to know that this is just the form of dialogue that works. But Wes Anderson, instead of creating a simple, job for the audience, he sets his characters up on the extreme edges of their frames, so far to the edge that the audience literally, especially if you're in a theater, when you're watching this, will be like, okay, here's Jude Law or Zero, and then there's the cut, and now we're over here
Yeah.
watching this character, and it's an L-shaped comp on either side, and all we're doing all day long while we're watching that scene is like a tennis match, right? It's a volley back and forth. And Wes Anderson literally takes our bodies and is forcing us to work, not only like mentally but physically, in the
Mhm.
smallest sense, because you're sitting in a movie theater, there's not much else, it's not like we're running on a treadmill, but he's making us work for it.
Mhm. And it's
And
even
that's such a
exact.
cool, like,
Yeah, it's even exaggerated with the anamorphic frames as well, especially like,
yes,
yeah. So I completely
yeah.
agree with that.
And anamorphics too are, like, for the most part, the action in anamorphics happens center frame, just because the way the frame of the shape, the focus, oftentimes the edges, it creates like a vignette when you get those wides.
Mhm.
Yeah, he gives us two, wide shots, not extreme wides, but wides nonetheless, with our characters sitting there having conversations right next to each other. And to us, it feels like they're so far apart. And what that does, not only for us, doing the work for watching them and putting the scene together, but it's creating that distance for these characters, this young writer who's just trying to find his story, and this old man who's lived it. And although they're sitting right next to each other, they're very distant, right? But at the end, they're like sitting there eating dinner together, I think.
Yeah, and then like he
You know?
shows them to like a room in the hotel. I think that's kind of that ends the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
But,
it's wild, you know, and it's such a simple thing. But I remember seeing that in theaters and watching that scene for the first time and being like, son of a bitch, you know, like this is why we love this man, and this is why he's good. Like
yeah,
it's why it's not just like, oh yeah, Wes Anderson, like sure, symmetry, color palette, I got it. No, it's like he's working even in the smallest, which would normally just be, all right, we got to get our coverage, we need shot, reverse shot, like let's get this, let's move on. He just sets it up in such a way that's like so intricate and so lovely and so wonderful.
no, like he's a visionary in that sense. Like, and I think what he must be a workhorse in his storyboards, like just an absolute workhorse. I mean, there's no, because exactly what you said, just his shots are just so deliberate, and kind of going back to like making his edits recognizable. What I like to think of is the intro to Moonrise Kingdom with the narrator. It's like, and again, very Wes Anderson, just like very campy, direct narration that just kind of like sets it up. But again, like just very
frame narrating, you know, frame narrative as well.
Exactly. So just like it hits all the beats that I expect in it, just like, you know, just like the framing, like the whole dialogue, the kind of like very recognizable abrupt, well, I shouldn't say abrupt, but like recognizable cuts, and just like kind of going in like in different areas of the frame, just like, you know, he's going like full shot, then like kind of like mid close up. It's a whole over. But
I'm trying to look up too as I'm listening to you if he works with the same DP across the board.
Robert Yeoman.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because like that's obviously such an important relationship. I mean, you bring up the, you know, the storyboarding and like how detailed and intricate and you know, painstakingly so that must be. Of course, you're going to want to like work with your team that you trust to continue on, you know, through your career, and that's amazing. You know, you see that stuff all the time. Like M. Night Shyamalan working with John Rusk. You know, like people
like now it's not John Rusk. It's with DP. It's Mike Giolakis for Shyamalan.
Well, Rusk was first AC.
Or
first AC or first AD. But anyway, we digress.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, going off.
But you know what I'm saying? You know, like you want to build your team, you want to work with your team. That's why you see it's why you see Bill Murray in a lot of Wes Anderson's films. You know,
and
they get it. They get the style, they get the form.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and I think it's more critical for a crew, because I feel like it's important to assemble your crew, because casts can come in and out. But for crew, like that can always be ongoing. And once you kind of find people that you click with, and that's the core group you want to stay with. Because even
speaking of which, when are you coming back to the States?
I'm thinking about it, man. But like, I'm just trying to get
more importantly, when you do come back, when is it going to be LA or not? But anyway.
Yeah, so that's the question. Well, like I'm talking to the others, I'm talking to Spencer, Max, like, you know, I'm just trying to figure out this thing called life, like sort of deal. But like what is it?
Stop trying to figure it out, let it figure you out first.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I know. Just I don't know, I'm crazy. Like I just don't have, like, you know, I've got a wire or two just not attached, right? Like the gears are caught. But yeah, just I really appreciate like the reoccurring crew, because like, I mean, all the directors have it, but just with his DP Robert Yeoman, like I think I do remember watching an interview about him, but like the only thing I can remember is that every question like Wes Anderson has to Robert Yeoman is, are we in the center of the frame? Almost every shot that Wes Anderson like talks to Robert Yeoman about is just like, are we in the center? Yeah. Every time. Like, but he's made like 4 or 5 films with Anderson, so just like it's more of an expectation. But I think like,
yeah, it makes sense.
But like you would have to, but kind of going back to production design, like to make sure everything's symmetrical, they probably had to tape measure some of these shots to make sure it was perfect, because like they must have had to like, because if you're just off by a little bit or like millimeters, it just ruins the shot. So like I have to imagine they must have like had a tape measure to like, not to make sure like the scale of the production design was correct, but with the perspective of the camera, like it must have been like a little bit of film-esque, like as of how like you don't really have the monitor to watch what your shots are. You just have to kind of like get some tape and then just kind of guess what the focus is. But like, I just imagine they have to do that to some degree and make sure they get the symmetry right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it just seems like something you just can't eyeball it. Like you can say like, okay, this looks good, but knowing Anderson, I'm just like how meticulous he is. Like,
Yeah,
there's got to be it's got to be mathematically correct. At least in terms
it's. I mean, I think it's tough for you and me sometimes to understand the scale of it too, because you know it's like doing all these. But he's probably like on a more macro level, building the sets based off of the lenses that he's using. You know, like it's probably like as a lot of times we're working with shooting on location and things, friends that'll let us like borrow their house to like shoot a scene for it. Like that's where we're at. He's probably on like, okay, here's the lens that I want. Here's the look that I want. Let's create the space and mise en scène accordingly now. Right. It's like it's a whole other level. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting you brought up macro, because what's oddly ironic is that like some of his sets are like extremely small and tedious. Like if you remember the trolley cart scene in Grand Budapest, it's literally just this box. It's literally just like a box on a trolley that they're just pushing. They just have fog or like steam just going on in the background. Just like it's kind of the ironic that like his worlds seem epic, but they're just like actually just like cram spaces.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like in a way, he's playing into format like we know he plays with aspect ratio a lot, but he's playing with the format of the times too, like, which is a cool thing that he uses is the movie starts in like a anamorphic wide, right? And then it cuts down to that like 4:3 format for the bulk of the film, which is obviously playing into the time that the scenes are taking place. And I think that's just like a lovely touch that seems simple, but how many people are shooting, 95% of their movie 4:3 and putting it out in theaters?
I mean, it's starting to become a little bit more popular. Like, I mean, like Lighthouse, First Reformed,
Eggers,
Story,
sure.
A24 stuff.
That's the only other one I can think. Well, yeah, maybe did mid 90s too. Yeah. But what are they? They're doing the same thing. They're these period pieces, if you can call the 90s a period piece. But yeah, like. Right, because that's what we grew up with. We grew up with our little TVs that we had to, when our mom was coming up the stairs, we had to turn the TV off and it was still like hot, as John Mulaney jokes about, when you come in the room, like you can still feel the heat coming off of it. It was that 4:3 box, and we had full screen VHS tapes that was just a total ruse, and we didn't know any better. But yeah, I want to see it. I don't want to have to see this like letterbox for like most of my tiny like little screen. I almost just lost my coffee.
Yeah, but
simple. But that's Wes Anderson. It's like we talk macro, we talk micro. It's simple things on a huge scale that then look small but are really big.
It's just like like even his miniatures, like for his establishing shots, just like I feel like it encompasses all of that.
Yeah. And who doesn't love miniatures, right? What's like the best looking film of all time? Star Wars, right? Jurassic Park, right?
All right, so I feel like we've talked a lot about Grand Budapest. Let's talk about something we haven't talked a lot about. Rushmore. I think that's like some.
You'll probably be doing most of the talking. I think I've seen Rushmore one time. So
yeah, I've seen it a few times. And
you cussing with me?
Sorry?
You cussing with me? Wait, no, that's Fantastic Mr. Fox, isn't it? Oh, are they? That's Rushmore. Yeah. Yeah, that's all you. So
yeah. Well, like I'll at least I do kind of want to riff off you a little bit, but like no, but like Rushmore, it does have a special place in my heart because it was one of the first Blu-ray DVDs I ever bought for my collection. Like I know you've never seen it, but I had like a 300 Blu-ray sort of collection sort of deal. And it was like the first Criterion Collection Blu-ray I ever bought. So like Rushmore's got a special place in my heart for that. Sure. And I don't think it was the first Wes Anderson film I watched. I can't remember. It was either Rushmore, Moonrise Kingdom, or The Darjeeling Limited. It was one of those three. I can't remember. But Rushmore.
Now first Blu-rays, but yeah, go on.
Yeah.
I
But
think mine was like it was either Clockwork Orange or Bronson, Tom Hardy.
the Tom Hardy. Yeah. What's his name?
Bronson.
I'm trying to remember the director. He did Drive.
Oh, did he?
Yeah. Nicholas Winding Refn. Okay, sorry, it took me a minute.
No, no worries. But yeah, go on.
Yeah, sorry. But yeah, going to Rushmore. Like I feel like I actually never saw Bottle Rocket, like the feature. I've seen the short, but I've never actually saw the.
You still haven't seen Bottle Rocket.
But it's the only feature I haven't seen of Wes Anderson. But I've seen like all of his other stuff. I've seen the short, but I've seen Rushmore on.
Okay.
So like I am disappointed because like I know that like it's kind of like his defining little feature, like that, like kind of, I shouldn't say defining. I actually feel Rushmore is just more like his launch pad.
I think you should see Bottle Rocket though, just to see a Wes Anderson film that feels or looks. It feels Wes Anderson, but it doesn't look Wes Anderson, which is super interesting.
Yeah, that's the way I feel about Rushmore, is because it's very much a Wes Anderson in terms of story and themes. Like, we're kind of dealing with family dynamics, like some slight tragedy, I guess, with the character trying like coming of age. Like, I feel like it's very much thematically Wes Anderson. But again, he didn't have the look quite down yet, just because he was still learning his the craft.
Well, I mean, we both said it, or we both said it. Like, I don't think he had the look perfected until Grand Budapest.
Yeah, I would say it was more perfected in like Fantastic Mr. Fox. I think it started coming more to light in Royal Tenenbaums, but I feel like when it came to Fantastic Mr. Fox, I feel like that's where his symmetry like was really well put together, and like his long shots. And I feel like
perfected.
Okay, perfected. Okay, Grand Budapest. All right.
Because I think it's an interesting thing to note is I think Grand Budapest is his masterpiece. And when you make your masterpiece, where do you go from there? And I think it's really interesting that you bring up Fantastic Mr. Fox as, where you think that his style and form is really like coming together. Because what did he do after Grand Budapest? He returned to that animated format. And yeah, like super interested to see, how the French Dispatch is going to look.
Mm-hmm.
Has that come out yet?
No, not yet. Is it coming out this year? Is it coming out next year?
IMDb says 2021, but I don't know. It also looks like he's working on another one. So, and that's IMDb says slated for 2022, which sounds impossible. Maybe it's a short. But yeah, I'm really interested to see how that turns out, because in my opinion, like, I mean, I don't know, like, how do you, when you go Mario Galaxy, how do you go any bigger?
Yeah, like I don't know. I mean, but it's the fact that like it's kind of like Scorsese coming off Raging Bull or Goodfellas. Like, what can you do after that? And like you just continue trying to make the films that you kind of want to. Like maybe people aren't gonna like it as much, but like just like who cares what other people think, man? Just like make what you want to make.
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't know. Maybe in his mind, it wasn't his masterpiece.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he's still got that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like with every artist, like he probably sees all the flaws that are in it.
Oh, yeah. as I'm sitting here doing my best to eliminate any continuity errors for this short film that I'm editing, and I'll spend an hour just trying to make sure there's no continuity error on one thing and before I move on. Oh, it's a pain in the ass. Never set up a shot reverse shot with wide enough to have both characters in it looking straight forward. Don't do it unless you really rehearse.
Unless you're Wes Anderson.
Yeah, well, I'm sure he rehearsed the shit out of that, but
yeah, well,
because when you're not looking at your, when the two characters aren't necessarily like facing each other, if they're, let's say, sitting in a car or on a park bench, well, they're not always looking here because it's more natural for them to look forward or look out the window, or like it's a pain in the ass. But anyway, why you brought up Rushmore? I'm not gonna be able to say much about it, but like, yeah, what do you got on that?
Well, like not too much, but sorry, I'll go back to Rushmore in a second. So one more thing I wanted to bring up. So you just mentioned his shot. You mentioned his shot reverse shots earlier, and you brought up again. One thing
Yeah.
that I think are fairly absent in his films are over the shoulder shots. I feel like that's pretty absent in his films. He does very like distinct medium singles, or like
Yeah, he has. Yeah, there's no place for an over the shoulder shot in any of his films. You know, there's just it's not his. It doesn't exist in his universe. I feel like.
Yeah, it's just, well, like I feel like that again adds more to his presentational styles, because I think the way we look into like authentic world is through over the shoulders. Like it feels very voyeuristic. It's kind of the way we kind of keep the conversations. But
Fincher, right? Fincher's like a big fan of those.
Honestly, I'm a huge fan of over the shoulder, because I do like the idea of like both characters being in the same space. Like geographically speaking, I feel like it makes the frame feel better and works better for the scene. I like having both actors in it, except when it's like maybe like a close up, like chest to like just a head close up. But really, for any sort of medium shot or wide shot, I really like over the shoulder. Even like if it's just a little piece, I just feel like it buys the geography of the scene, because I always feel like it's a little amateurish when, like, or at least for me, when I just see someone sometimes just looking off frame in a single, and just like, is that character really there? But like, I just feel like I just buy it a little bit more if I just see a little bit of a shoulder. Anyway, it was just a little intricacy that's not very that prominent in his films. But going back to Rushmore for a moment, so I'm thinking of like little things
I could also, if you like expound on that a little bit, to say, to reference Every Frame of Painting again, and he goes all into how to sell comedy through dialogue, and he references Coen Brothers, right? And he explains how it's typically like a pretty wide frame, somewhere around like a 22 or 24 millimeter lens, and he puts that low angle looking up towards our subject, and he'll put the camera in between, most of the time, and it'll be like a medium wide shot looking up at a character, and then the reverse shot. And the way that Tony Zhao like explains it is that it's, well, one, you're in the space, so you feel a little vulnerable with the characters. When you're a voyeur, you're not really like invested. You're kind of just like, oh, what's going on over there? But when you're placed, camera is our vessel in this instance. When you're placed literally between, the dialogue, it feels a little vulnerable, and it's almost like, although these characters are looking off screen, it's almost as if they are talking to us. And yeah, a crazier thing too, which you rarely see. And if I could do like a little pitch here, I think everyone should watch Search Party on HBO Max. If you haven't seen it yet, I really do. There's this one scene where they're, not to give too much away, but they're trying not to incriminate themselves in regards to something rather heinous, and this police officer is simply just, a light little interrogation at their apartment, and they switch over to the shot reverse, tight, where it's a direct address for both characters, and it's super uncomfy for the audience, because now both of these characters are looking right at us, and you like rarely see that, but anyway, that's a quick tangent. But yeah, Wes Anderson, right, we talked about earlier, with just how he's able to establish this comedy through his framing, like especially since there are these heavy themes, these dramatic themes, it helps sell these dramatic themes and keep them comedic and light, depending on where you put the camera. Like it really does have a huge impact on the audience's or the viewers like comfortability level. And yeah, we want the audience, and Wes Anderson, I'm sure would agree, wants the audience to feel a little vulnerable, a little awkward, and as if they're standing there next to these characters as they're just being like these unreal caricatures of I'm sure like real people that Wes Anderson knows, like that. It's just, it really super important, and you'll see over the shoulder in a lot of like Fincher stuff, because it's like voyeuristic, and it's like raw, and it's like, oh, like we feel a little skeezy watching these, like we're not supposed to be here. Wes Anderson's like, no, you're here, and it's awkward, and you're stuck here, and you're going to be here with these characters until they figure their way out. It works super well. But anyway,
Yeah. So quite a thing you're going off. But sorry, just a note when you're talking about characters or like cast, like
Mhm.
just that little thing that I like is just his well, like he's assembled kind of like, like this huge ensemble, like almost like a Woody Allen movie, just like a big name of like A-list actors. But what I find interesting is that he's known to kind of attract actors that have been known to be difficult to work with. But they love working with Wes Anderson. Like I think Ed Norton is probably like one of the big ones who's like has that reputation of being difficult to work with. But he's worked with like Bruce Willis, like Bill Murray, even to some extent, has had like a reputation sometimes being challenging to work with.
Well, Bill Murray makes sense. I didn't know that about Edward Norton, but yeah, Bill Murray is a piece of work for sure.
Yeah.
love
Yeah.
love him, but yeah, yeah, he went into Harper's office one time and was just like being Bill Murray. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like I expect that out of Bill Murray though to some degree, but I think it's because they know that they're working. Like I think everybody that works on a Wes Anderson film, unless you're like a slated like star in the film, you probably get paid scale. Like you don't go to Wes Anderson movies to make money. Like you go to make a really good movie. And I think, yeah. And I think like maybe I am curious of how he exactly works with actors, but I think the fact that he like is so like distinct is just the fact that like it attracts actors to be like, this guy clearly has been very consistent. Like, let's make a good movie together. So just like I think that's his ability of like trying to like is how he's been able to attract like so many of these A-list actors to work for pennies.
Yeah, I mean, I think about yeah, people like Franco and Gosling who will do these bigger movies. And interesting too that like James Franco did something like that Wizard of Oz, whatever the hell that was.
Oz,
but then we'll do like Palo Alto probably for like a box of chicken nuggets.
Yeah, Spring Breakers. Look at all my shit.
Well, Spring Breakers is a masterpiece.
It really.
You want to talk Harmony Korine next time we can.
Yeah, Harmony Korine. Yeah, we'll do a dive deep on kids and was it Gummo?
Yeah, Gummo, freaking Trash Humpers, Mr. Lonely, Beach Bum. What am I missing? Oh, Julian Donkey Boy.
Yeah,
we could. It'd be fun too. Doing like a Damien Chazelle because that's easy. That's
yeah,
like a free movie.
I've been wanting to rewatch a guy in the Madeline Park Bench. Like I actually not. Why is it rewatch? I haven't seen it, but like I have it like right at the ready, kind of on my computer to watch it.
I've never even heard of that.
Oh, it's his feature. Like it's his first feature before Whiplash.
I'm looking it up now. I thought Whiplash was his.
Oh, that was his kind of like first that was his platform film, but he has he's got like a black and white 16 mil feature.
Awesome, yeah. Dude, let's do him next time if you want to.
Yeah, dude, I'm down. All right, but so
yeah.
we keep getting off topic. So all right, after I think like 15 minutes, all right, Rushmore. All right, we'll get to it. So I know I went on and like how I figured out Rushmore, important Blu-ray, yada yada. Okay, so a little bit of thing. So kind of going back to like his sets and kind of like I feel like for the most part he built his own sets. But what's interesting about Rushmore is that it's pretty much on location at a school, but the school that he's shooting at is actually the school that Wes Anderson went to. I think it was like his high school that he went to. So it just kind of one of the few moments, at least like early in the career, where like he was shooting on location and like but if, again, like adding more to his auteurness, just like shooting in something very familiar, he'd be very much a visionary of. Mm-hmm. But I think I really just, and I know I've mentioned that like a lot of his themes carry over, like looking for a nuclear family, slightly tragic character, coming of age. The romance in the movie is very much inspired by The Graduate. If you ever like, just kind of like, the Jason Schwartzman film acting debut. But
is that right?
Yeah, he was 16, and like he got introduced by I think him and Wes Anderson met at a party, and I think it was introduced by Nicolas Cage, something like that. I don't know. I was maybe, but like it was, but yeah, I think it was like 90, 98, 97, something like that. Maybe 99. Can't quite remember the exact year.
98.
Yeah, but Yeah, Jason Schwartzman acting debut. I honestly put it up there as like one of the best acting debuts like in ever, like feature film, like just considering like, fresh face, 16-year-old, but you're Coppola. I kind of expect that. So.
Yeah, we could talk nepotism in Hollywood some other time for sure.
Yeah, but it's still a good, but yeah, like it's still great performance nonetheless. But the whole romance in it, just like a student falling in love with his teacher, or like crushes on his teacher, is just like, okay, like kind of seen it before, but like it kind of has like kind of like this Bill Murray is kind of playing like a bit of this father figure to Jason Schwartzman, and like but he's falling for the same girl, so it's this like very interesting love triangle is what's kind of interesting about it. Just like my mentor, who's kind of like a father figure to me, who this woman I'm crushing on, like, but just obviously doesn't have feelings for me, but he also has feelings for this fat father figure. I'm just like, oh, what a conundrum.
Yeah.
But one of the little interesting things that that's very Wes Anderson in the film that he started using in his act breaks were like his kind of like curtain call like transitions. Like there would literally be a curtain call and and I think it said like third act or like the play, like in like these title cards. It feels very much like in Grand Budapest, where they're going from like concierge to concierge. They have that kind of title card. That's where it started. So it's very much that like, and it was in his act breaks. So I'm like, okay, like that's where like the glimpses of his like very presentational style started like peeking through, or at least like a trademark, I should say.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I'll definitely want to rewatch a lot of his earlier stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but just again, but like he was shooting very handheld in Rushmore. Like he hadn't quite like narrowed down his symmetry or anything like that quite yet, but he was shooting very much handheld. And when I'm thinking about handheld, like following that, he really saves it for like very like, I would say, freeing moments in his movies, or like maybe like acts of defiance. Like, because I think of Moonrise Kingdom when he goes into handheld. And if you look at that movie, the two main moments where they go handheld is when the two kids are on the island dancing with each other. Like it's kind of like, we're not with our troop, we're not with our family, it's just us two. So it just feels real, like in the moment, like having that first kiss. It's just like, okay, like, it's very like freeing, and like, we're like, it's a very growing moment. And the other moment that I think of is it was in slow motion, and it's when they it's like right after they get married. So just like, again, like a very like act of defiance, like kind of cathartic moment that like, okay, like, we did this, and now we're like, we're gonna leave this place to be on our own. So I feel like it's very like like I feel like his handhelds are just certainly very character defining moments when they're defying the world. Mm-hmm. Very much like Wes Anderson, like his films are like on sticks, on tripods, and then whenever he kind of goes like handheld, he's defying the world, he's defying the rules that he's built. So when the characters do, I'm just like, it adds that extra to be like, okay, like the language that he's established like feels like more freeing. So, and like since he was, and that's why I feel like Moonrise Kingdom and Grand Budapest tend to show that a little bit better, just because he refined it more in his style. But since he didn't really have that in Rushmore, just like it was very classical Hollywood. So like just doing like what you mentioned earlier, but I do feel like, his story was very Wes Anderson, but just in terms of visual style, just wasn't quite there. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it's cool. That's something I never really picked up on for the, because you think of like the obvious, when you go to like a handheld shot, it's might be to, match the action on screen or something, or just, like portray like a more unhinged something that might be going on in the character. But yeah, for sure. Like, and it never really stuck out to me before, but now I'm sure when I watch these movies, I'll be like hyper vigilant for when I did, like you saying that he even had handheld shots was like, oh, like I wouldn't even expect that, like I wouldn't. But yeah, now that I'm thinking about, the dancing on the beach,
like, oh yeah, just like, so it's just those freeing moments where just like, that's where it begins to peak out. I'm like, okay, like, but that's what but it's where directors break from their trademarks is kind of what becomes interesting. Yeah, but yeah, just I'm
Maybe
not.
the French Dispatch will look completely different. Maybe I'll just start over again.
Jesus. But yeah, just I think I just really appreciate those little moments because like we do have these certain expectations or what we have or that we have going into his movies. And then anytime I kind of see that little break, I'm like, it feels refreshing. At least like
those moments are just for you.
Aw, so sweet. But yeah, I don't think I have too much else to really rip off like Rushmore. It's just the fact that like it was pretty much his launching pad. Bill Murray got paid like $7,000, but pretty much like invested in the movie itself. Like he
spent it all at the right?
Well, like there's a behind the scenes little tale. Like they had like some helicopter aerial shots in the film. They couldn't afford the helicopter, so what Bill Murray did is that he wrote a blank check to Wes Anderson, said go do it.
That's
and
awesome.
like yeah, and then like again, like Bill Murray was on this film for like I think 3 weeks of production, and then made like $7 grand. But he's Bill Murray, like you can do that shit.
Yeah.
All right, but I'm just wondering, like, was there a film we haven't really spoken about yet? Like, because
a film we haven't?
Well, I mean, like we've touched on Bottle Rocket. Like, I actually don't really know too much about Bottle Rocket. It's just these two guys like on a heist, or post heist or something like that.
Bottle Rocket is a story about brothers. They're
Luke
brothers.
Wilson and Owen Wilson, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, Owen Wilson's character has this inclination to like he's a schemer, he's always coming up with plans. I think the opening scene is them entering a house and stealing as much as they can in a certain amount of time, and then like when they're walking out, it's the same in the short, I think. And they're stealing from like their parents' house or something. They're doing like a makeshift or a practice heist, right? They're trying to see, and it's very much Owen Wilson's character is kind of immature, but also like the leader of the two of them, and so Luke Wilson's going along with a lot of his schemes, and yeah, it's just kind of about that growing apart, because Luke Wilson realizes that his brother, although he loves him and has this connection to him, is kind of a detriment to him living, his life. It's kind of holding him back in these instances. But yeah, go watch it.
I probably will at some point. I feel like I not necessarily that I treat it like in the same way I treat Alien 3, like David Fincher, because that's the only Fincher film I haven't watched. But like, I feel
that's
like
my favorite Alien.
Oh wow! I think you're like one of one.
One of one.
Yeah, but like
well, my favorite Halloween is 3, so I think I'm also the only one there. So.
All right, Season of the Witch. All right, well, you're alone on that one. But
yeah.
I think I always like the idea that there's always one more. I think I like that because it's just I feel like yes, it's nice to have like a complete collection of everything. Just like it's just kind of like it's like completing a novel or like an anthology series in your head. Like it's nice, but I always like the idea there's always like one more that I have to watch. I don't know, I'm weird like that, and I know I will eventually watch Bottle Rocket because I'm committed. Like I like Wes Anderson. I'm committed enough to it. I was doing the same thing with Paul Thomas Anderson. I've never seen Hard 8. I've seen all his other movies, but like it's just
Do you just have season 6 of Lost on a DVD and like a chest somewhere?
How did you guess, man? It's just like I've got it on the pillowcase. I mean, I sleep with it every night. Like, I mean, I'm just like, I'll get to it. But yeah, just I do remember one interview with Wes Anderson when he's describing like an early screening of Bottle Rocket, and he's like going into it saying like we were getting like we presented like test audience cards, like when people like can take notes saying like what they like, what they didn't like, or like at this scene didn't really make sense. Everybody was writing like SUKD. And then just like people were like walking out of the theater like not getting it, and then finally he had like one person who like wrote like an outline of a dissertation, like understanding like all the themes, all the comedy, the visual, like he was like, I stuck with that for years because like I was just like one person got everything that was going for. And then like a few years down the line, he was at like some convention and bumped into the same person that did that card. And they just have like an awkward interaction saying like, I know who you are. She was like freaked out, like, okay, all right, okay, weirdo.
Which one was freaked out? The guy that did the card?
Well, like it was just I think it was just some girl that wrote the card out, and then and Wes Anderson read it, and I guess he really held on to it, thinking like, this is like the niche I'm going for, like the one person that got it, like, and I think it's the fact that like he kind of held on to his thesis of that, just trying to like, okay, the themes are going to carry over, the style is going to carry over, the dialogue, everything, just like, because one person got it. So like, it wasn't necessarily misdirection. We just know we're not catering to a general audience.
Right. And he's kept that consistent, because you're never going to see a Wes Anderson movie released, to every theater and play for like 30 days. You're going to see Wes Anderson movies come out and play in a theater for 2 to 3 weeks. Play like once or twice a day, like 10 a.m. and a 5 p.m. and that's that. Like that's his theatrical run, and that's what he sticks to, and that's what he likes. And that's I think about like going back to Shyamalan, who kept this format of like PG-13. He had a very like specific, his films almost had like a low budget feel to them, because he was a fan of long takes, and it was still like right on that cusp of like digital and film, right? He's right there. So when he, in my opinion, like his departure from that format, the PG-13, and like what he was used to when he went R with like The Happening, and granted, he had been on like a decline, at least critically, with his films, and Lady in the Water, like people shout on that, but like when he really did that departure, it just like really like was not good, not well received. Nobody liked The Happening, right? And then he like was like, all right, well let me try PG with The Last Airbender, and it was like the worst film ever made. So I don't know. There's something really respectful, I think. We've seen Wes Anderson jump from like live action to stop motion, which works for him. Personally, for me, like the stop motion films don't do it quite like his live action films do. But that's me, like that's my personal preference. And I think there's something so noble that he doesn't care necessarily how much money the movie's going to make, or if it's even gonna break even, like he's just telling stories, and he's telling stories for the people that enjoy them, nobody else.
Yeah, so he's one of the handful of people that can do that. Like, because I think even Spielberg, he has to pick projects that like, okay, it's gonna make X amount of dollars, even though he's like, a billionaire 4 times over or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, he's got to pay people, and I don't know if you've done your research on like the size of Wes Anderson's crews, or like
not really.
I'm not entirely sure. Like I don't know what the budget is. I know he uses a lot of miniatures and that kind of thing, that maybe he's able to save money. And I'm sure, like the actors and the talent are like taking pay decreases to do these films. But yeah, it's great that in the age of Marvel and just the monopolization of the film industry, that there are people like him. And I'm sure he's gotten many offers from big studios to do things and has turned them down. I'd be surprised if he wasn't.
I think he was just one of those actors that maybe after he made his first film, he probably had like a bunch of like general meetings to make bigger movies. But I think the fact that he stuck to it, like being on a tour, like those roots, I think is just what kind of kept him sustained. So because I do feel like that's a dangerous thing, is that when you have a very much an auteur film, and then you get an offer to make a big, like not that every director can get that offer, but like I think it's very tempting to get that offer to make a blockbuster, like a more mainstream film, because it could essentially be, because if it's successful, it could be a launch pad to be like, okay, this is what I really want to do. Feels very much like a Robert Zemeckis sort of thing, because he made, I think, Romancing the Stone before he made Back to the Future. And even before that, he made like half a dozen box office bombs before that. So I think that's been a lot of thinking with a lot of early directors, just trying to like, okay, I'll make my quirky little personal piece to kind of like pitch to be like, okay, I know what I'm doing in the craft. I get a blockbuster. If it's successful, then I'll really make my passion project. Where I feel like Wes Anderson kind of skipped that. Just like, okay, I have my quirky film, then I'm just like passion project. Like,
Yeah, he went for it, and I don't know what necessarily were the keys to his success. I'm sure Bill Murray giving a blank check helps. But yeah, well, you're starting to see it too, and you're starting to see that influence of just kind of sticking to your laurels with people like the Safdie brothers. Like turning down a lot of offers when they're going to festivals with a lot of their guerrilla style shoots, and it's exciting to see that more and more like indie filmmakers are feeling emboldened to stick to their indie roots and not be swayed by these big studio meccas.
yeah. Sorry, just quick question. Like, I think we're probably gonna wrap soon, but like,
Sure.
yeah, you brought up guerrilla filmmaking, and I've always had this thought. Do you find it to be lazy filmmaking to an extent?
In what way?
So like guerrilla filmmaking, like it's like no light setups. You just have your camera. You tell your actors go in the scene. Like maybe you have a bit of a scenario set up, but like you don't.
A dig at corrupted youth?
I just brought that up with Spencer, but yeah, just like it very much feels like that. Where like I don't discourage it because okay, like if you are kind of going for maybe like a found footage sort of approach to it, I'm like okay, like I think it makes a little bit of sense, but I will say like I don't really like going into anything without at least some idea of prep or maybe just like some sort of bounce light or like a really meticulous idea of what day of light we're shooting. But I don't know, like when I think guerrilla filmmaking, I just think very amateurish or like barely student film-esque.
Do you think that about in particular the Safdie brothers work?
Not necessarily. Well, I haven't seen their one film where it was pretty much that. Like, because I don't feel that way with Good Time and Uncut Gems, but there was a film before that.
Heaven Knows What.
Heaven Knows What. Yes, that's exactly what I'm thinking of. Like, I haven't seen it, but I've seen the trailers for it, and it feels like, and I think it was shot on tape, right, or like some sort of like camcorder, something like that.
Not entirely.
Yeah, well, it's just like that's where like okay, like I think I get the style that they're going for because like it's supposed to kind of be like following a heroin addict and like very unpolished, unkept sort of like situation, but I feel like you can accomplish that same look for something like Tangerine because it was shot on an iPhone, but again, it wasn't guerrilla filmmaking. They shot it like a real movie, but just kind of keeping that unpolished look. Yeah. Where like that's where like I kind of had this little divide or like I don't know if guerrilla filmmaking is necessarily it's a kind of filmmaking, but I just don't know if I consider it like very like I just don't know if it's like technically quality filmmaking. That's my issue with it.
This is my perspective on it. I've been on sets where there's 50 crew members and there only really need to be 15, and I've been on sets that it's me with a camera and Cody in front of it, and nobody else is there, and we're able to pull out an emotional sequence where Cody playing Abe is crying organically, just from reading this letter from this other character, and we make it work, and it's always, I would say it's almost impossible to know like what exactly it looked like, what the situation was behind the camera. Sometimes it's palpable and you can feel it, and you can feel like, oh, there probably wasn't that many people working on this, but I don't know. Like if I watched like Uncut Gems, I would assume all of those things are happening. I would assume that space picture, like the jewelry store and all that. I would think that that's lit, a certain way, a specific way. I'm sure they took hours to do it. I don't necessarily think that they're filmmaking now, although you could still call it guerrilla for certain things. But it's not, I would assume, I don't actually know, I would assume it's not to the same capacity that they were making those films before they had people like Martin Scorsese involved. Like I gotta imagine that his involvement is giving them something and making production, if not more by the books, I guess I'll say, making it more insurable, right? Like, because I'm sure there was days where the Safdie brothers would go out and they'd want to shoot and they'd have to cancel when they were making their copious amounts of shorts and features that they did pre Good Time. But yeah, I don't like, I try never to be like, when it comes to anything, a snob, you know. I think if you're able to make it and you're able to get it out there, great. Because a lot of people will just talk about it or write a script, you know.
Yeah, like I'll think about making something, or like, oh, you'll never make it.
Yeah.
You're gonna make it if you just think about it.
Yeah, I think a big shortcoming of my own is that I've started several projects, features, shorts, you name it, and have not finished them for one reason or another. And I'll sit on these what could have been, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know, like, sometimes it's just like, well, it just wasn't there, and I canned it, or a scheduling issue. But yeah, I think it's always a very admirable thing if you're able to pull a film off in any capacity, and with any look, however you're able to get it done. And if I truly believe that the Safdie brothers were doing those movies, and yeah, maybe they were tailoring their stories to what they had at their fingertips, but they weren't just making like drug movies and like running around New York. There was other films that were different and felt different, and were just like different narratives. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think there's anything wrong with Gorilla in that sense. I think of it more too as like, we went out there without permits. That's what Gorilla means in my mind.
Oh, okay, that's a fair way to think about it.
More so than anything, like we put a long lens across the street, and Robert Pattinson ran full speed down the road, and there were just people walking past him that didn't know who he was or what we were doing. That, in my mind, that's guerrilla filmmaking. Like,
I can give you that one. Yeah, because because I feel like that kind of buys into like what it needs to be, kind of like Rebels in filmmaking, very much like a Werner Herzog sort of idea.
Yeah. Well, from my own experience, there was days on set on Neon Fangs that we're in a studio or in a space like a bar or a dance floor that we rented out and had permissions, and everything was fine, like nobody was going to come and like tell us to stop or confiscate our footage. And then there was times where we were just 2 weeks ago, like going downtown and filming at certain locations that we didn't have permits for or anything, and again, just like Cody and me out there with the camera, and him like walking around with the sword, and like anything could happen, and we're getting that. So Fangs in many ways is both like guerrilla and not, so I don't know, you do what you can. You just use everything at your arsenal to make as close as you can to what you're picturing. I don't think there's anything wrong with doing what you got to do.
Yeah, that's fair, and I don't want to discourage filmmaking in any sense. I just feel like when you're a new filmmaker,
lazy,
no.
I wouldn't say lazy.
Yeah, I just think like for new filmmakers, it's just like, okay, like let's just get it out there, and just like that, and their artistic way to explain it is just like, oh, we're guerrilla filmmakers, we're just making. I'm just like, because I think it was something I totally said, and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, like it's my excuse for not being prepared. But I like your idea with it, because I feel like Safdie brothers, like, or like shooting without permits, is very, I think, more in line with what the idea of guerrilla filmmaking is.
Yeah, and going back to like how I first started that convoluted long answer, you could have a crew with 50 and only need 15, and I think a lot of people defer to that 50 because there's too many cooks in the kitchen. And I think when you have a clear direction, like someone like Wes Anderson and his team that he works with, because I'm sure it's not always Wes Anderson and his AD or his team talking for him and who understand him, they might not need that many people. Sometimes that's like an insane amount of people. Like there's just people sitting around on their phones. Like, I don't know. Do what you can. do as much prep as you can. For sure. And then even if your prep is, okay, we're going to go out there with a camera and we got to get it in like 10 minutes because then we're going to get arrested. That's not lazy. It's just what it is. It's you're working with what you have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. All right. I kind of like the way we're finishing off on there. I like how you tied that in, but yeah, that was, but yeah, because I think we went off on Wes Anderson, but I think we'll wrap it. I think that's about time. But like,
All right, man.
yeah, but dude, thanks, man. I always like,
Yeah.
appreciate the talk. It was good catching up. Haven't seen you in like 6 months.
I know.
Deal.
I know.
New life.
Yeah, I think
for both of us.
If you wanted to do another one with me, because Wes Anderson was obviously like huge to tackle, and I didn't even like try.
I'm hungover, man. Like I'm
yeah.
If
you wanted to do like Damien Chazelle, though, that's way more manageable. Whiplash, like Whiplash is like a super important movie to me. I have like my fucking like, so I would love to get into him.
If you want to do it, oh, sorry, go ahead.
It's only 4 movies, if like whatever. He's like, that would be, I could watch all 4 of them before we talk again.
Yeah, he has a TV show, doesn't he? I'm pretty sure he's got a TV show, and he also did an iPhone short. If you've ever seen it, like it was like big on YouTube when they're like pushing iPhone filmmaking.
Yeah, I hate iPhones. Well, we could also what's his face would be interesting too. The Ocean's films.
Oh, Steven Soderbergh.
Yeah, Soderbergh would be interesting.
Yeah, well, like I've been pushing the film Contagion a lot just because considering the circumstances, but it's a film that actually, like, it's weird because that film actually might go down as like a cinema classic now because of the times. Like, it's because of what happened in the world that makes that film like it's kind of like a song becoming like popular again 20 years after the fact, but like because the world changed. But it's kind of similar to that film because it was fairly like it was kind of like your run-of-the-mill indie film. It was very like like it was good, but like it was just kind of like okay, but not too many people saw it. And like, but now that like we're living what that world predicted, it's just like fuck, why didn't we pay attention? And like it's pretty much like to a T like what happened like this past year, Contagion. So but again, what we could talk about it. We could talk about it another time.
Yeah. I don't know if you know his like beginnings too, Soderbergh. Super interesting story though. Like he shot fucking what's it called? With the Sex, Love, and Videotape. And like just like brought that thing, around with him in like a briefcase down to like Sundance. And I mean, it's just like funny. It's like he got totally, I was gonna say totally boned by Weinstein, but who didn't, right? Yeah. But yeah, like Weinstein was the one that kind of gave him his start after he made that movie, and then like fucked him over, and then his entire career. I feel like Soderbergh is just like the most bitter motherfucker because he just was like had such a bad, he won the Palme d'Or, however you say it, French, but yeah, and then like he just was kind of doing shit that he didn't really want to do, and then he was like, well, I'm gonna make movies on iPhones now. And it's like, and now he's like might be heralded as like this great predictor.
Well, we'll save Soderbergh for another time, but but I like where you're going with this because I feel like he's an interesting person to deep dive into because he's, I feel like he's been in the Hollywood system, but now he's kind of going back to being like an amateur filmmaker.
Exactly.
Years, so
it was like it wasn't too late for him. It wasn't like Spielberg who like could never possibly break out of where he's at,
But, I mean, like it's the fact that like he had to retire. He retired twice at 2 separate times to try to get into that. Like
Spielberg.
Oh no, Soderbergh. He retired 2 separate times. So, but like but but I do, but I haven't seen like all of his, I haven't seen all of his films, but like if we do
No,
do
no,
them,
I
wanna
haven't
make
even
sure that-
I haven't seen a single of the Ocean series, actually.
I've only seen I think I've seen the first one, and then I've seen bits like splices of 12 and 13, but like I've seen like Unsane, seen like I want to see Chi. Chi is the one that he did with it's a mini series with Benicio del Toro, where he's doing the where he's playing Chi, like the was it Chilean or like Argentinian like rebel? I can't remember. South American rebel.
Oh, Shay?
Shay, why say Chi? Shay, fuck.
I don't know. I was like, what are you?
Sorry, I'm whitey. Like, you know, I'm saying my my CH
Che
is
Guevara,
like my honky.
Cuban dictator, Che Guevara.
Yeah, Cuban. Okay, all right. Okay, that proves my ignorance. Like, you know.
Yeah, the cigar and the hat.
Yeah. All right. But I think we'll leave it at there. But like, but good ending, man. But thanks again for doing the call. I'm on a 4-week rotation right now. I'm trying to get a 5th one involved, so we're not as like, you know, pushed about it. But we'll talk more about Damien Chazelle, like, and we'll work out a time for about that because I'd like to do him too. Because I've been
Well, I will just try to like watch. Did you know Damien Chazelle wrote 10 Cloverfield Lane? Interesting.
Yeah, he was a co-writer, co-screenwriter.
Yeah, but like I'll just make it. I'll make a point to just watch these just in case because there's not much, you know.
Yeah.
That short's called La La Land. Just kidding.
And the winner is.
Oh, best moment ever. All right, man. I'll let you go.
All right, man. Well, thanks again for the talk, but we'll talk. But I'll send you a message later. All right, dude.
Yeah. Take care.
All right.
Don't put too much stock in anyone's stockings. All right,
bye. I'm trying not to. I'm trying to keep it to myself, man.
I'll let Harper know.
All right. Cheers.
Bye.